Since Russian troops began taking up positions in Crimea last week, world leaders have responded sometimes cautiously, but sometimes forcefully. CCTV's Nathan King is here to analyze the meaning and the tone of the international response.
That's right, Mike. As the international community tries to get Russia to talk to the interim Ukrainian government, the rhetoric used by world leaders and diplomats is also evolving. We thought we'd take a look. When it comes to crafting the diplomatic response to the crisis in Ukraine, words are everything.
This is our enemies.
Just last weekend, the US was using words like incursion to describe Russian actions in the Crimea. And now,
an invasion of Ukrainian homeland.
And the stronger US rhetoric is backed by some actions too. While the US maintains that force is not an option, the Pentagon announced a show of force Wednesday.
The Defense Department is pursuing measures to support our allies, including stepping up joint training through our aviation detachment in Poland.
The European message, meanwhile, has been more measured.
We are trying to use every diplomatic opportunity to bring Russia and Ukraine into direct contact with each other.
And Germany, too, is cautious. A recent statement from the government said Berlin was, quote, entirely focused on bringing about a political process. All of us know that it's the only reasonable way out of the crisis. Mixed messages, maybe, but also perhaps a carrot and stick approach. The US, with the largest economy and the strongest military in the world, is also less dependent on Russia. Europe, which depends on consensus among 28 nations and is heavily dependent on supplies of Russian gas to keep the lights on, perhaps more cautious. As for Russia, while being accused of armed intervention, the talk was of fraternity.
We believe and we will believe that Ukraine is not only our closest neighbor, but is indeed our brotherly republic. And our armed forces are brothers in arms, friends. Many of them know each other personally.
Putin also denies that Russian troops are outside their bases in Crimea, words that have left some speechless.
You really denied there were troops in Crimea?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, the issue is the choice of words by US and Europe politicians and how it shows the difference in policy in response to the crisis. Remember, before the Ukrainian crisis escalated, Mike, a top American diplomat used an expletive to describe European inaction over Ukraine. No expletives, at least publicly this week, but the difference in rhetoric suggests that significant divisions between the US and Europe remain.
That's an interesting side of the equation. Nathan, this European caution, that stems, though, from potentially having to live with the consequences of any Russian reprisals if sanctions are imposed, right?
Absolutely. We talked about the reliance on Russian natural gas. Much of it is pumped through the Ukraine, about a quarter of natural gas, but also the hundreds of billions of dollars that Russian oligarchs and others have invested in Europe. Remember that document that was revealed by a sharp-eyed photographer going into number 10 Downing Street in London, which basically was a policy paper which said, look, we don't want to shut off the city of London to Russian money. Now, it's not stated policy, but it suggests the nervousness in one of the European capitals. And remember, London is only a recent convert to Russian influence. Just think of Berlin. So it's really interesting just to see the nuance in language in any international crisis, but this one particularly, because it's a real test of the transatlantic alliance, which of course remained after the end of the Cold War.
Nathan King, live for us in our newsroom.